Welcome into the National Rundown. I'm your host, Brady Locke, joined alongside my co-host, Geono Alosio. And today is our very first episode here at the National Rundown, where we are breaking down all the Canadian coverage of the CFL and the CEBL. Geono, give us a little bit more in depth of what we're doing here at the National Rundown.
Well, first off, welcome everybody to the National Rundown. This is everything everybody's been waiting for. If you're a CEBL fan, this is what everybody's kind of been waiting for, is a CEBL specific national show. But we also cover the CFL, and we're going to be getting into lots of that stuff. We also cover any other sports that really intrigue our interest. But we're mainly a Canadian sports coverage, and we're really excited to get going here. But yeah, the National Rundown is going to break down everything you want to know in the CBL and the CFL each week, and all the hottest headlines. And we'll have lots of takes for you guys, and everything from special guests to cool segments to keep you guys informed and make sure everything is broken down in a nice way for fans alike to get to know the league and stay informed. So yeah, we're really excited. Off the line is we're here to do some CFL and CBL coverage. We're going to have a lot of national coverage with our website. And then the idea is to have everybody be able to catch up on everything here with the National Rundown, so you can stay connected coast to coast with the leagues that you love right here in Canada. So that's pretty much what we're here for. That's the quick 30-second rundown of where we're at. But yeah, we're really excited to get things going here for episode 1 of the National Rundown. And I'll throw it back to Brady for him to introduce yourself and all that stuff, and then we can get into me.
Yeah, so my name is Brady Locke, as I've mentioned, and I'm along here with you guys for the ride. I'm a newbie into the CBL and CFL scene, so as much as I have some takes, it's going to be a lot of me learning alongside you and alongside our expert here, Geono. So I'm really excited. I've done a lot of podcasting in my time. I'm really into the sport media side of things. But I'm huge in NFL and NBA, so it has some correlation, but I think really getting into that Canadian scene where there's a lot of unhidden talent and potential for a lot of lost coverage. So I think here what we're doing at Off the Line in the National Rundown is going to be great to help those voices of those athletes really get out and see where they can go. So I'm going to pass this along to Geono. I could talk forever about myself, but let's hear a little bit about him.
For sure. Well, first and foremost, I'm a huge CBL fan, huge CFL fan. Obviously being out west, it's a pretty big part of our lives out here. I've grew up a huge CFL fan, obviously in Edmonton, all that stuff. Lots of great teams, lots of great memories at Commonwealth, all those things. So yeah, it just kind of felt natural to be able to have something where we could talk CBL and CFL. There's not many people that kind of focus on those things, so I thought, you know what, I'm missing something. I'm sure there's other people who want it too. So to kind of get into this stuff, I'm an absolute huge football nerd. I do love the CFL, probably a little bit more than the NFL, unfortunately. But you know what? That just gives me a lot more to talk about, a lot more stuff we can talk with the CFL. And then also the CBL, obviously love the NBA, all that stuff, but I'm a huge CBL guy. Lots of good memories at the Expo Center, watching the Stingers. So it's really, really cool to be able to get into this stuff. Obviously, just a huge sports nerd that loves to talk sports. I could go on and on, so yeah, we'll kind of get into all this stuff. And I guess I'll throw it back to Brady. We can kind of go through a rough timeline of what people can expect from the National Rundown, and then kind of get into the little bit of our meat and potatoes for the first episode.
Yeah, so each week we're going to have a lot of fun segments here planned out. We have things like the National Pulse, which we'll get into later. A lot of debates, guests, and it's going to be just a lot of different opinions that really are going to, spark your interest and get down to the nitty gritty of these two leagues. And that's honestly what Geono mentioned, where a lot of these sports nerds, they don't have a place to really get all this information for the CFL and CBL. Whereas those other big leagues in America, you have all those ESPN, Anywhere you can find somebody going in depth. But CFL, CBL, I think we're losing that a little, and this is what we're here for.
100%.
But for this episode particularly, we're just going to review a little bit of last season in both leagues and, see what some of the big headlines are going into this year. But as we get down the line next week, we're going to have more of a CBL focused episode as the first game of the season will be May 9th. So we want to kind of preview that and get all ready. And then moving forward, we'll get more into CFL as the season will start there in early June. But for this episode, let's get right into it and let's review last season. So starting in the CFL, I know the Rough Riders won last year. They beating those Alouettes. Geono, what were your thoughts of the season?
Well, first and foremost, I think it was probably one of the most exciting seasons, probably in the last 5 years. Obviously, lots of great stuff with the rivalry between Saskatchewan and Montreal that goes back to the early 2010s and late 2000s. Obviously, being a kid, those are like my prime years of what I remember the CFL growing up. So those were first and foremost probably some of the best games that I've watched all year. Definitely, not a great season in Edmonton, and there's a lot of great stuff that we can probably focus on outside of Edmonton across the league. But you know what? I think Saskatchewan definitely proved something. They'd been building for 2 or 3 years to get to this point. You could feel it when they hired Corey Mace. It felt like it was due. This was really just kind of a coming of age moment for a team that had struggled for a lot of years. There was a lot of times where they went up against the Bombers and they couldn't get it through. There was a lot of great times, in the late 2010s where people thought it was going to come through. Obviously, 13 years since they had last won the Grey Cup before last year, so kind of felt like it was the right time, and it just felt like everything happened with the perfect moment with Trevor Harris, staying healthy, being able to get his first Grey Cup as a starter. There's so many cool things across the team for any storyline that you could follow. Obviously, for a sports nerd like me, I was really happy to see that. It's definitely really cool to see how everything unfolded. And then obviously the Alouettes had a really cool season where they were trying to go for their second in 3 years and get that. Obviously trying to compete with Toronto, who had 2 and 3. So obviously lots of cool things that were really exciting deep down the season. Definitely a lot of cool stuff happened over free agency, and there's so many cool headlines going into this season where it feels like the league is wide open. You can say that every year, but it really feels like it this year. There isn't really truly a number one dark horse or a number one front runner. Everybody kind of feels like they're in close competition with each other. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. Like I said, Brady, you can throw in yours. I know, like you said, you're learning the league, but we love to hear what you're thinking of. How last year kind of went and what you're kind of maybe thinking of for this year.
Yeah. So I'm a Toronto-based guy. So the two teams that I've always, seen throughout my time have been the Ticats and not the Alouettes, the Argonauts. Last year, I see those Ticats. They were first in the East there.
Yeah.
What kind of happened to them? I want to know, why was it Levi Mitchell's fault? Well, really, what was it that caused them to lose?
Yeah, there's a lot of things where it comes down to the last moments. Now you're gonna quickly understand this as a CFL fan. The fifth quarter, which is the 3 minute warning and going through that. Games are mostly decided there. This is where if you're leading, you're not. It may seem like you're close to winning, right? When you're used to that in the NFL, where you can run out the clock. That's not what we do here. It's a little bit more different. A lot of games are decided in that moment. Teams usually get the chance to be a little bit more aggressive because they know, hey, we're down to the final few minutes. So obviously, looking back at the East Final, Hamilton came within a few points, and that's really the difference, right? Now, were they probably going to beat Saskatchewan? I think that's a different conversation. I feel like Montreal probably had the best chance, but looking at it, they had a cool history / storyline going into that game. Obviously, the Riders won their last Grey Cup in 2013 against the Ticats, so that would have been an interesting one. But definitely for the Rider fans out there, it's definitely probably relieving for 2010 and 2009 with the 13th man to beat the Alouettes to finally get the Grey Cup. It definitely felt like it was getting back to the Ticats, just a perfect moment of you have to be really disciplined, and the team that makes less mistakes is usually going to be the one that comes out on top in the 3 minute warning. They call it the fifth quarter, and that's because it's its own ball game. It doesn't matter what happens up to that point. It really matters what teams can do to execute in the crucial moments. it definitely felt like for me, the Ticats were probably right there. If I didn't have to pick another team out of the East, I'm like, it definitely felt like it was the Ticats. The Alouettes. I would have picked the Ticats, but things just sometimes the cookie doesn't crumble your way. Jason Moss and the Alouettes have a great coaching staff. They've been there, they've done that. It was really exciting to see them kind of rebound after moving on from Cody Fajardo. Definitely a lot of cool talent there. So really felt like it was just something that came together for Montreal in the late moments. And, there's definitely lots to still build from for Hamilton for this year.
Yeah, looking at it, it just feels like that East is just so, I don't want to say weak, but it just feels like it's so much like a whole step down from that
Yeah.
West.
Yeah.
Looking at the records from last season, like it's crazy, the Red Blacks and the
Yeah.
Argos, and then there's only two other options. So
Yeah. 100%.
there's not much there. I mean, I would talk about the Argos, but I feel like, coming off that Grey Cup in 2024, I don't even think they earned much of a discussion after
Yeah.
their performance last season.
It was a little bit of a disappointing season. I think that's easy to say. Obviously, it's funny. We mentioned the fact that the East seems like, weaker on paper because, statistically it's true. But at the same time, it's interesting that we've had so many teams from the East win it recently.
Yeah.
Obviously, you look at Toronto 2 and 3, and then Montreal in there as well. I'm like, it's a little bit like weird that that's kind of the teams that are winning it when you think about how strong the West is. But like I said, usually there's somebody that kind of emerges from the East as the true contender, and maybe whatever it just is it coaching or all that stuff. You just find that for some reason these East teams are kind of running the table. Definitely really cool for storylines to get the East some cool championships. It's definitely a good thing for the league to see that everybody's just kind of in a healthy position. But it was really cool to see a West team get there and win it last year. Like I said, I felt like that was the first time in a while that you could say the West team was probably their best by far. But definitely, yeah, the East has always kind of been that weaker division. Obviously, there's always been talk of a 10th team that would help that, but that's always been that's always something that's happened, but never quite been actually able to get across the finish line.
Yeah, so I mean, all this talk of the divisions, it
Yeah,
it kind of makes me think, with this new playoff format that they've come out with, if you go over that a little bit, and I kind of I'm curious, do you think that it'll help a little bit, kind of
yeah.
blur out those divisions a little?
Yeah, it definitely will. Right now, what we've been dealing with is the crossover, right? If a
Yeah.
team in the East is like the third seed and they've got a 5 and win record, right? Like I think the Argonauts finished with last year. I think Winnipeg crossed over because they had 8. So usually, if the 4 seeded team in the West has a better one in the third seed in the East, they let the 4th team cross over from the West and compete in the Eastern Division. And I think that's worked. I've always been used to that. The crossover teams have never had a great record in the playoffs. I don't think anybody's ever won it as a crossover team. So, a lot of what people have been talking about with the playoffs recently, right, obviously in the last few days about changes, it definitely feels like this might help. Being able to kind of blur the lines of a division into the playoffs, but at the same time, there's a lot of stuff that comes with the downside of that, making it 8 out of 9 teams. There's so many conversation points you could talk about there, and I'm sure we're going to get into that in a future episode. But definitely it might help division-wise get a little bit more competitiveness, but at the same time, there's a lot of trade-offs. And I mean, we could probably go on for like 30 minutes to an hour just on this topic alone. But yeah, definitely a lot of cool potential with it, with the format to help alleviate the divisions, but at the same time, there's a lot of downsides that I think a lot of people have already pointed out, but I'm sure we'd love to get our opinion on that next episode.
Yeah, no, I definitely do want to go in depth about that because that's something it's like I think a lot of leagues can struggle with no matter
Yeah.
who you are, finding that right playoff format. And I think
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot of issues with some other leagues, but we'll
100%.
save that for another time.
Yeah.
Moving forward here, um, we can go a little bit more CFL. There's going to be those rule changes next year as well.
Yeah.
Is there anything that stands out to you there? We won't go too far in there, but
Yeah. There is a
anything that's
lot. There is a lot when I'm thinking about it. Obviously this year it's more minor changes this year. Like one of the small things is obviously like opposite sides of the field have opposite benches. I think there was some teams in the East that were doing it. I don't even think most fans knew that that was still around, myself included. I'm guilty as charged. There's a lot of stuff there that I'm like, this didn't already happen. I think the 2026 changes, a lot of people can get behind. I think that includes the modified Rouge. There's a lot of stuff where, making it more understandable. I think people can get behind that. I'm interested to see. I think the big thing is people should be open to change if it means it's a better product. But I also don't think that any change is good change, right? You can't just have change for the sake of change. I feel like the 2026 rules are probably going to mean a little bit better games, especially when it comes to the Rouge. It's the 2027 stuff where things start to get a little bit murky, and obviously with what's happening in the 2027 schedule, moving up the season and the playoffs being expanded, there's a lot of interesting stuff for people to get through where it feels like the status quo has been thrown out the window. And like we just mentioned, I'm sure there's lots of stuff we can talk about then to get into it and have a full more episode to give everybody our thoughts.
Yeah. But as we are here, we're both CBL and CFL. So let's kind of dive into last season in the CBL, especially as we get into next episode. What do you think of the Niagara River Lions? Do you think they will go back to back to back? Is that an option?
It's on the table. You can never say no, right? The CBL is so wide open, right? And in a league like that that's so tight, there's so many teams that you can look at to be like, who is the team coming out of the East, right? It feels like there's a lot of talent out in West, but obviously the East has some dogs. You can't count out Niagara, right? You think about the team that they have right now, there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to be a contender. But you know what? There's also a lot of hype around Brampton, and for good reason, right? Bringing in like Sean East, there's so many good, talented guys on Brampton that, it's something that they finished with like 5 wins last year, and they were pretty much an easy win when they came up on the calendar. But this year's going to be a lot different. I can't say, where is their ceiling, because at the end of the day, you add a whole bunch of new pieces, things can change, right? Things can look good on paper, but when they actually get going, there might be some, hidden flaws that we didn't quite think about. Obviously, adding Jameer Nelson, I think he won DPOY last year, and then obviously Sean East the II was one of the best players in the CBL last year, MVP candidate, broke the single season scoring record in his first year. I mean, the guy's just like got written superstar all over him. So to have those two guys on the same team, immediately on paper, you're like, it feels like it's Brampton's time. But at the same time, I'm not ready to count out Niagara yet. It's 100% on the table.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, even considering that team in Brampton, it's like Brampton, like being around Brampton, it's like Brampton is such a city that it's like, you never think of anything much sports-wise coming out of there. And I think that's maybe part of the reason why they don't maybe draw as much signings originally.
Yeah, 100%.
Like it's not the greatest place.
Yeah.
But to see that they could have a good team would be amazing for Brampton.
Yeah.
It's just going further than sport, but
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, adding those two guys, Jameer Nelson, Sean East, that could be huge for them. And I'm actually really excited to watch this season, because being a newbie, I have tuned into some CBL games, but I do love the format of it. And I know maybe some people don't know the format. Could you just kind of like go over that a little bit for me and the others?
For sure. So, kind of like going back to the CFL fifth quarter, 3-minute warning. The CBL is a little bit more different. Obviously, if you're a CBL fan, you kind of know what I'm talking about. It's called target time. When you get to, I think it's 4 minutes, you turn off the clock, and whoever team's leading their score, they add 10 points to that. And it's first team to hit that score. So say if one team's winning at 90 points and the other's at 80, they're going to add 10 points to the team that's at 90, and then the target score is 100. They turn off the clock, and it's first team to get to 100. In my opinion, I was a little bit skeptical, obviously, when I was first getting into it, when I'm like, hey, this kind of seems like a gimmick. I'm not really into those kinds of things. Obviously, like, you'll definitely know when we get into the CFL playoff talk. But I've come to really love it. There's really a lot of cool stuff when you think about how it eliminates, just getting fouls and drawing the game out. And it's like, we've been here for like 3 minutes and on the clock, and we've been here for 10 because somebody just keeps fouling. And, like I said, that's an NBA thing. I'm cool with it. The NBA's got a cool product, but when we think about the CBL, it really makes games exciting because you can get that 20-point cushion, right? And then be like, hey, all you got to do now is get 10. And there's been times where, guys go up and they just start missing shots, and it really makes a team earn it. It's resulted in better endings, in my opinion. It feels so much better when you kind of know the game isn't going to end at a certain time. It's more you have to watch your team make shots. And there's been times when I've been at the Expo Center and you're like, man, what's happening? I'm like, we've been up like 12, 15 points.
Yeah.
And now we're down to like a 5-point lead. And then obviously it comes down to the wire. It just makes the ending of the game so much better, regardless of the score. It's something that I've absolutely come to love. It's quirky, but it's nice. And when you kind of get into it a little bit more, you start to really appreciate it. I feel like it's something everybody loves, and it's definitely something that's unique to the CBL, which I love to get behind.
Well, yeah, I mean, as much as it's like in the NBA where you could like you earn the win, but
Yeah.
you're at the end you're just kind of like dragging it out all this.
Yeah.
The entire time in the CBL game, you gotta earn it and you gotta,
Yeah.
take that win. It's not just gonna be like, you're relying on the clock. I think that's great.
100%.
I think
Yeah.
honestly, I think like some future leagues should try to implement something like that because it's always exciting. It's always, a good game.
I agree 100%.
Yeah. CBL, any other big headlines you think heading into this season that are
Yeah.
really going to be huge?
Yeah, I think obviously the one that we were talking off camera about a little bit was Xavier Moon's return to Edmonton
Right.
on May 9th. It's going to be on CBC, nationally televised on the new broadcast deal. I've been thinking about it. There's a little bit of some heated rivalry stuff coming up. Jordan Baker was talking in the media or through the Stingers PR team about, the grass isn't always greener, and he's definitely mentioning, Xavier Moon. The Stingers have leaned into that a little bit with their social content. It's really cool. I think there probably isn't a bigger storyline out there right now heading up to the season. Training camps open on May 1, so a day before that we were recording this. Things definitely feel like the CBL is getting ready to pop, right? It feels like, getting on CBC where they first started is going to be nothing but great for the league. Obviously, TSN did a great job, but I think having a CBC deal just kind of helps. Being able to have nationally televised games just helps, especially when it's a CBC like provider rather than a cable thing like TSN. Honestly, those are pretty much some of the big things. I'm really excited to see the Xavier Moon game in Edmonton. I'll be there, obviously covering it. There's so many cool storylines that I'm looking for. If Xavier Moon it's kind of going to be a weird rivalry game of sorts,
Yeah.
but also at the same time, it's going to be a critical tip-off point for the season, which is going to be a great way to start the year. So honestly, the schedule makers right there, tip your hat because that was a great one. Great way to start the season. Then the other really big things kind of going into it, obviously the CBC deal. It's going to be interesting to talk about and see. It's definitely something we're going to be covering after the first thing to kind of break down how we kind of feel the league and how the TV stuff was working. Then the other thing is also the new playoff format. Definitely a growing trend, I guess, with Canadian sports leagues, fixing up your playoffs. The CBL went with a championship weekend host, so you'd have 4 teams. One of them is an actual host in their host city. They get an automatic buy-in. Then you have the rest of the 3 teams have to win their way in. That's no more. I believe it's now going to be a 1, a 3, and a 3. So best of 3 finals. And teams actually get to host championship games in their own city. Definitely a unique concept, the championship weekend. I could definitely throw it back to you, Brady, and what you kind of think on that stuff. But, I think going into having an actual championship game in your city, it's just going to mean more, right? To be able to play in front of your home fans. Like, if I was in Edmonton and, the Stingers are playing in the championship, right? If I'm an Edmonton fan, I'm like, am I going to go fly out to Winnipeg? I'm like, probably not, right?
Yeah.
Grey Cup, that's a little bit different. It's been around for 100 years, right? Things are there. It's tradition. People are used to that. The CBL, I just feel like it's too new to get there. But what do you think of the championship weekend stuff and how that comes across to you?
I don't like it a lot. I think
Yeah.
a lot of you see it sometimes in sports where they'll put a host city gets an automatic bid in.
Yeah.
I don't like that a lot. I think you got to earn it. And I think part of the
Yeah.
reason you're playing all these games is, that one team, whether that's the top team hosts every year or whether that's, you host separate games in different cities, but you got to earn the right to host a game, I feel.
100%. Yeah.
Even if you're just trying to get every city involved each year,
Yeah.
I like it better. Just, build your team and earn that right. So
100%.
I
100%.
think this format will be 10 times better. So, and I
100%.
think both playoff formats will be great for
Yeah.
leagues respectively.
I agree with that.
But yeah, so one last thing I kind of want to lead into, because I know you have some pretty big opinions on this, but I
Yeah.
kind of want to lead this into the into the next episode.
Yeah.
What do you think about the new Saskatoon Mamba and coming from that
Oh.
Saskatchewan Rattlers?
I
What do
mean,
you-
I'll be honest. It kind of shocked me. Like, I think it shocked everybody. Obviously, I'm kind of close to Saskatoon. I don't live in Saskatoon. I can't tell you what the fans are thinking, but judging by how people perceived it on the day of the launch, it was a little bit out of left field. I'll say that. The name, immediately you think of Kobe, right? And
Yeah.
I'm like, is that something you want to be tied to as a sports franchise? You don't want to teeter on the edge of becoming like too minor league baseball, like talking about the trash pandas. I'm like, we're trying to take ourselves seriously. I've grown to like it a little bit more. The name, I'm like, I can get behind the Mamba. I was perfectly fine with the Rattlers. I know that they had a new ownership group, and I can understand the motivation to do something different. But at the same time, I'm like, change for the sake of change is never really a good thing. I think obviously you're asking fans to get behind a brand new identity after they've already had one for, I think Saskatoon was in the league immediately, so that's like 6 or 7 years to immediately switch things up. Fans have jerseys, right?
Yeah.
Going in and asking them to go buy brand new stuff, I'm like, you kind of have to make it really something that it kind of associates with the city. And I mean, like I said, I'm not going to speak for Saskatoon, but it just feels like a weird name. The color scheme as well, the pink, they're going to look like Power Rangers out there. I hope not, but that's probably what comes to my mind. It
I
just
like
comes
the
across
old
as a little
logo.
weird.
Like, really, I don't.
It was a good logo, man.
Yeah,
I'm a little bit shocked that they decided to go with something different, right?
this new one, it feels like a little bit, little too basic from what they had before. Like the
Yeah.
side view of the snake, I like the front view. It gets those
Yeah.
features. It's a lot more detailed.
Yeah.
Just that's my opinion, but
Yeah.
yeah.
No, I agree. We can definitely talk a lot more about it and maybe bring in some people to talk about it. But it's just a weird move. Like you have to think, like, I'm trying to think in an ownership's mind, right? You might be thinking, well, we're just coming in with this new thing. Maybe it's time to do a rebrand, right? Make it our own. And I'm fine with that. They own the team. It's their decision ultimately, but it's also it's also something that the fans have to live with. I hope that it doesn't drive people away. I don't think it's going to. I think people are just going to care about the product, right? Obviously, you want something that you can get behind and really embrace. Saskatchewan loves their sports teams, so I'm sure that they're still going to have a lot of strong, loyal fans there. But at the end of the day, I think the danger is you start looking at, does this feel like a minor league baseball team name?
Yeah.
I feel like they could have picked something better. And probably a better like color scheme. I really think you probably could have stuck with the the green-ish colors. I'm like, that probably works. Saskatchewan loves their green teams.
Yeah.
Obviously with the Rush being there too, and then also the Mamba, I guess. Well, the Rattlers, now the Mamba,
Yeah,
and
that's
then
a
obviously the Riders. It just feels like that's Saskatchewan's color, and I'm like, pink's a little different. Pink's hard to pull off.
Yeah, I don't know about that really. That's
Yeah.
something.
Yeah, it definitely feels like a weird pick.
Yeah, so I mean, I think we've done a great job here teasing, what is all going to be broken down here. And we're just touching the surface, right? This is
100%.
going to be a lot of in-depth conversation just like this with plenty of knowledgeable guests and some super fun segments. But we are very excited about the future of this podcast. And Geono, is there anything else you want to clear up about Off the Line and, really tease what we have going on here?
For sure, yeah. We got a lot of cool stuff planned for the entire CBL and CFL season. Obviously, lots of stuff to talk about, so each week I'm hoping people are going to tune in and make sure that they get their CBL and their CFL news and they feel like they're, learning something. Next episode is going to be really cool. In future episodes, we're going to have our free 10 minutes where people can get the laydown, and then we're going to break down everything like we kind of did here, but just more in depth, and kind of have our premium part 2 where we really break things down and talk about what this actually means for the teams, and you get to hear me and Brady's opinion on all the latest things that happen each week. But yeah, we're going to have a lot of great lineups for everybody each week, so people are going to be excited to tune in and listen to everything that we got to talk about. But yeah, really excited. There's lots of cool stuff happening around each league now, so I hope everybody, that tunes in feels like they learned something, and they feel like they want to tune back in. So we got lots of stuff coming in the future. Off the Line's going to have basically national coverage of all your favorite CBL teams, so definitely stay tuned for all that stuff. We got a lot of great writers that I'm sure people are going to love to hear. But yeah, really looking forward to seeing what the new CBL and CFL season brings us.
Yeah, I'm super excited. Like I mentioned, this is going to be the first year that I'm really aggressively watching all these and, really learning the ins and outs of the game, because I've done that with all the other leagues. So learning a new league is going to be so much fun. So I'm really excited.
100%.
I hope you guys are here along for the journey with me and Geono. And I think that's all we have here for today.
Yeah. We'll sign it off for today. And like I said, we'll see everybody for episode 2.